All right, so this is going to be a bottle demonstration, and this is going to be for ceramics too. The tools that you're going to need is a throwing stick, a needle, a sponge, and then ribs. I have 3 different kinds of ribs here, a metal, a yellow, and a red rubber rib. They're nice to have. So, I have a glove on because I don't have a fingernail currently. So get my wheel head damp. You're going to use for this project 5 pounds of clay. You're going to need to make your bottle out of stoneware because you're going to be raku firing this, or you're going to be horsehair firing it, and it's going to go through a lot of temperature or thermal shock, and it'll break or crack if you use a porcelain or a B-mix. So make sure before you start this project, if you're watching this, make sure that you get the right type of clay before you start, okay? So just like with any other project, you're gonna bring it up into a cone, then you're gonna center it down, and sometimes if your clay is not like all centered, you can always just take the clay and bring it back up a second time, and that helps. Okay, so do I want to center this really low? No, right? Because you're going to be making a tall project. So when you center this, it can be centered a little bit taller than you'd normally make a project. So bottles were originally used for preservation of liquids and grains because they're easy to stop the top of them, and they're easy to carry and hold. Could you guys imagine like holding a liquid in a bowl and walking around in the bowl? You'd have to use 2 hands instead of 1, right? A neck, you can grab it and just hold on like you're wringing someone's neck out. Just kidding. But for these, I'm gonna make the bottom just a little bit on the thin side. You don't want to make it too thin. But yeah, that's good. Okay. So I'm gonna make it flat on the bottom, just like I normally would, and then I'm gonna constrict the clay. You always want to make sure you're compressing the rim. Every time you make a pole, you want to either compress the rim or you want to cut off the rim and then compress it. And the way that that's done is like if your rim looks like that, you're going to take your left hand and put it on the right side of the project. Everyone do that right now. Your left hand on the right side of the project with your thumb on the outside. Then you're going to take your right hand and you're going to squeeze those 3 fingers together just like this. Your sponge should not be in front of your hand. It should be on your hand touching it. And you want to just hold that rim until it stops moving. Okay? When you pull, you're going to want to pull from the very bottom, because if you don't, your project's going to get really thick. And the farther you make your project go, the harder it is to make the bottom thinner. So right now at this step, this is where I want to work on the bottom and get that a little bit on the thin side. Now watch, see my hands, how they're very slow and consistent? I'm not changing the wheel speed, and my hands are going about the same speed up. And I'm just trying to get it the same thickness, right? But you didn't see my hands like going around and shaking like I was having a seizure, right? And you didn't see me like speed up the wheel, slow it down. You want to keep it at one consistent speed. Now notice how I'm keeping the top a little bit more skinny than the rest of the project. That'll be very helpful. What you don't want to do is you don't want it to be like straight or coming out on an angle. That makes it very difficult. You want to have it come, when you pull it, you want it to be like this or straight. but you never want your clay to go wider. Okay, so when you make a bottle and the neck's getting a little thinner, you want to make sure that your hands are wet and also the side of your arm. Just because you don't want the clay to grab your arm. I'm just trying to fill with my hands. Notice where my elbow is. Do you see how I'm jamming it into like my leg here? And then I just like put the weight of my body on my elbow. The reason I do that is so my hand doesn't move. If I have my arm out here, does this look like I'm more stable? Like if somebody were to bump me, I would go all over the place. That's why I go like this, so my arm doesn't move, okay? So once I have a nice tall cylinder, what you're gonna do, be able to make that base just a little bit thinner. Maybe I'll do just one more pull right here, bottom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to start bringing this neck in just a little bit, like that. And I'll compress my rim. See how my rim is a little bit thicker right here? You want a thick rim. If you have a really skinny rim, when you start to constrict that clay, it's not going to hold its shape. I mean, it won't be able to constrict. If you have a really thick piece of clay, you can grab it and constrict it. If it's too thin, it'll want to wobble on you, okay? So there's two ways to do this now. One, I can stick my hand on the inside and I can make it wider and bigger with my rib, or I can close this top off and then I can stick my throwing stick in here and then I can push the side of it out. I'm going to start with my rib first and just kind of widen it out a little bit. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, my hands are no longer going on the inside, so I'm going to get all the water out of the bottom. Notice how anytime I stuck my hand in there, it was spinning. You don't want to bump the sides of it when it's not spinning because it'll dent your project. Okay, so I can press my rim. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hands, I'm going to get them wet. And just on the spot that I'm going to be grabbing, which is right here, I get it wet, and then I'm going to start grabbing this clay, and I'm going to start constricting it in. Take my sponge, start here. I can pull this up a little bit if I want. I can keep constricting that in. There's a lot of different ways you can finish off the top of this. You could leave it straight. You could make it flare out like a fountain. You could make this into like a bulb. You could have it caving. You could have it going in. But anyways, now at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick my throwing stick in there. I'll go to the bottom, and I can now bulb it out where I want. want to keep coming up. You can ruin your project really easy with these. I don't know if you just can observe that. But like right there, I have a really thin spot. Just like an arch, do you know what makes an arch strong? Is the continuous curve and the pressure that's equally distributed. Right now this is not equally distributed. I have that big old bump there. So I want to have like a consistent curve throughout the whole thing. Okay, do I want to bulb it out anymore? Do I like that? Maybe I want to go out just a little bit more. I'm going to make sure that's nice and wet. And maybe just right here in the center. You don't have to use a throwing stick. You can just, you can widen it out, and then you can use your rib and then just close off the top of it, which is probably going to be the easiest thing to do. But throwing sticks are nice to have, but they are very easy to ruin your projects too. You just kind of got to watch the outside and say, okay, where do I like this? Then you can come back over with your rib. How many minutes are we right now?
12.
What?
12.
Okay. All right, so I could leave it like that if I wanted. I'm gonna close this in a little bit more. I'll put a really tight neck on this one. So how do you trim this? With a chuck. You would trim this with a chuck, meaning you would make a big cylinder, a wide cylinder, and you flip this upside down in the cylinder. Now I can use my ribs if I want here to get in those tight spaces, because it's a little bit smaller here. Your red rubber ribs bend really easy, so it's nice to have them for those spots. And then I always like to make sure that I always like to go over the rim of it with a piece of plastic. So I'll just come over here and rip off just a small piece of plastic. And then I'll go over it just to make it nice and smooth on the rim. And you just hope and pray that it doesn't rip off your Okay, so that is a bottle. I'm going to take my metal rib, go over it a little bit more just to make sure everything's smooth. so I can leave it just like that if I wanted. Anyways, that is a bottle at the bottom. Sometimes I like to just take a little bit off the bottom here so it's easier to take off, but and if you make it really thin, this is one project you can torch before you take off. If you want to put a blowtorch on this, that's totally fine with me. Okay? And that is my bottle. Thank you.